Welcome back to another episode of Fresh Out of College. My name is Ryota. With me is Drew.
What's up?
So today we're going to discuss fantasy baseball, especially with the baseball restart and how things are changing. We're going to kind of talk about some strategies, offer our insight as fantasy baseball or fantasy sports enthusiasts and champions. Let's get into it.
Let's do it. All right, Ryota. So you've had a long career of being really good in fantasy baseball. You've been in the top tier for a while. So I want to hear your first big key advice to the listeners out there. What should they look for in a draft?
Yeah, so this year's draft is interesting because there's a whole lot of things. I have just so many notes to look for, but we'll go. We're gonna have a long conversation and go into every detail about the season, but. First off, it's a 60-game season, so you need to take into consideration that just like
less games,
third of the normal games, right? Almost.
Exactly.
And the other thing is they had a short time to prepare really for this season. So there's a lot of controversy on figuring out who's going to dominate the league. Is it going to be pitchers or is it going to be hitters? And honestly, I'm split. I actually have no idea who's going to do better. I've been watching training camp, and I watched an exhibition between Pittsburgh and what was the other team? Pittsburgh versus the Indians. The pitchers absolutely dominated. It was 0-0 through the fifth inning. So I'm kind of split. A lot of people are saying pitchers are going to struggle and hitting will be inflated, but I actually might take the opposite and think pitchers might dominate, especially early on. Because the problem is there's a lot of streaky hitters in baseball. So, for example, Giancarlo Stanton, he's valuable for 162 games, but he might not be valuable for the first 60. Because think about it, this is like playing the first 60 games rather than the last 60, just in terms of preparation. So, from a pitcher's perspective, I think the pitchers have a great opportunity to dominate, especially the first month. And maybe hitters will get more into tune and they might start dominating again or balance it out. But I think the pitchers will have a huge advantage at the beginning of the season, just because. I mean, Drew, you remember when you practiced baseball? This is a long time ago. Think about it. For a pitcher to practice, what do you have to do? Just throw bullpens, right? And that's pretty much as most game-like as you'll get. But for a hitter, you need a pitcher to throw and a catcher to catch to make it game-like, which I think is harder to do, especially during this time, before summer camp. So I think pitchers might be a little bit more seasoned. What do you think?
I think so. For me, I think I've been also watching some of the spring training games, and I think from a pitching standpoint, I think they have limited their ability to go long innings, and I don't know if that's just to preserve their arm or anything, but maybe we are going to see more of the starting pitchers, maybe not go as far, maybe not go 7 innings, maybe not go 8 innings. We might only see them go 4 innings. So do you think that there was a big impact on, okay, my goal is I'm going to draft the first 3 starting pitchers. I'm going to get the 3 starting pitchers. I'm going to have 7 innings, and get a quality start, get all those points. Do you think people should look into, okay, maybe these guys aren't going to go 7 innings. Maybe they will only go 4 innings just because it's, like you said, it's a shortened off season. And what do you think? I feel like maybe that might happen. Maybe that might be more prominent.
Right. I mean, this pitching situation is just going to be difficult to, think about for drafting. Like we both draft tonight. So that's great. We're talking about it now, but for all the fans out there, it's really tough because I think you're right. Pitchers are definitely going to throw less at the very beginning, especially.
These injuries are so huge,
Exactly. So, and they're going to want to preserve as much as they can because again, this is just shortened. This is a rushed season, and that's never a good sign for actually any sport that requires a lot of, physical, movement or whatever it might be, right? So It's a little worrisome, and we see soccer teams, loading and making sure that they're safe. We see the NBA shortening their minutes for the first quarter, or first couple of games.
Yeah,
the MLB is not making a 7-inning games, but the coaches will definitely think about pitchers and pitch limits, and we've heard about it. Pitchers might be on innings limit or pitch limits, And we also see teams adjusting. Like the Mariners are going to go 6-man rotation. They've set
Yeah.
that in. They've made that clear that that's what they're doing, and that just gives another extra day of rest for the starting pitchers. So, I mean, it's interesting to see. I think one way you could approach 6-man rotation is that pitchers might be able to go longer, or go their normal length because they have an extra day of rest. But at the same time, for those that are 5-man rotations, yeah, you're right. We might only see Clayton Kershaw go 5 or 6.
Yeah. And I guess 5 or
But
6 2-run game or two runs wouldn't be too bad.
right, but
But
3 runs, for 4 or 5 is going to inflate the ERA compared to
yeah.
3 runs in 6 innings, like you said. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really think pitchers will dominate early on. So we might see Clayton Kershaw go 5 innings, 6 strikeouts, 1 run, which is good in terms of fantasy because if you're not based on points but you're based on categories,
Mhm.
that's going to help your ERA. That's
Yeah.
going to give you a decent amount of Ks. But I think the general advice would be probably to pick pitchers maybe a round or 2 later than you normally would.
Yeah, here's
Because
my
Clayton Kershaw in the
yeah.
past has been, like the 15th pick sometimes. And those elite pitchers like Scherzer and DeGrom could probably be 3rd, 4th round picks too. But I think generally you should wait on pitchers on this because we really don't know. There's just so much going on, and when you pick a pitcher that high, you're
Mhm.
really relying on them going 7 innings, 2 earned runs, 10 Ks, right? That's like a
Yeah.
good outing, a consistent outing you want from a Cy Young pitcher or Cy Young candidate. But if you can't get that, they're not worth being the high second or low second or just a second round pick in general.
No,
Um,
I agree with you. I also think it's like you said, if they're not going as many innings and it is categories, this could lead to more inflated ERAs if they're only
right,
going 4 to 5 innings. But then you
exactly.
have a closer that has to that might have given up 2 runs,
Hmm.
but is only going 1 inning or going an out.
Exactly.
That could even up the ERA. Just looking at it more generally.
Hmm.
Um, I think so. My thing for this is if you can get the top 3 pitchers though, like a Garrett Cole, Jacob DeGrom, I don't know how you can not pass it up because, I mean, they'll get the strikeouts.
Hmm.
They won't give up a lot of runs or walks, so that
Right.
helps the whip, that helps the Ks,
Hmm.
um, and you could get the win
Hmm.
because Garrett Cole is on a Yankee team that is very good.
Hmm.
I don't know.
I think.
There's some things to look at,
Hmm.
especially with a shortened season. Maybe you go everyday hitter earlier and more
Hmm.
abundantly.
Right.
Um, I also wanted to let you know or make aware that some big names have tested positive for
Hmm.
COVID and might not be at 100% strength.
Right.
Don't know with the virus how long it lingers. So we don't know if they're going to be 100% for only the 60 games. So,
Mhm.
for instance, Tyler Glasnow for the Tampa Bay Rays was recently tested positive
No,
for COVID-19, and he is a starting pitcher. Maybe we'll see everything
he could have been
shift.
a Cy Young candidate this year.
He could be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I did not know about that. Thanks for letting me know, Drew.
yeah. Yeah. Good thing this podcast is releasing tomorrow and not
Yes.
because but yeah, I mean that's a big thing like you said, like maybe the Rays will switch to, I don't know, a 6-man rotation because their pitcher has been out. But then again, what if he does come back? How are you gonna like project that?
Hmm.
We've never seen this
Yeah.
happen. We don't know this virus, so we
Yeah,
don't know if it's
exactly.
gonna affect his stamina, I
Yeah.
don't know. He
So
also
I
hasn't
think,
had the preparation, so
yeah, to go on top of that, especially for this year, you really have to be on top of your news and check
yeah.
the free agent market, during fantasy. Because, yeah, I mean, it just takes one positive test and you might hear about it in a couple hours and you realize, oh, Justin Verlander is not going to play for me for a month, So you really have to be really on top of your news and make sure you're, watching the market, especially if you're in your like 15-man leagues where your,
Yeah.
options are really limited. You have to make sure you're really on top of it. And also read into the, players and teams that you have even after you draft them. So like, for example, if you draft the Mariners and you didn't realize that they're 6-man rotation, that might change your mind. Or You
Yeah.
realize that the Rays are going to use their bullpen more than, whatever the, coaches' sayings or statements. Yeah, you have to
Mhm.
really be on top of it because you never know. And things change. And that's why this season's really hard. And we don't really know, again, what starting pitchers are going to do yet. Not all
Yeah.
teams have announced. So honestly, I'm not going to give away my draft strategy, but it might even be worth streaming starting pitchers. And you might even have to just not draft any elite pitchers. I don't know. I think stacking hitters is a little bit more important this year. I think though
Yeah, I
than
agree
other
with you.
years.
I mean, like you said, the ability for them to probably play every single day is higher than a pitcher going 7 innings
Hmm.
normally than just maybe only going 4.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, do you have any other I guess I guess to not give away your draft strategy, what other advice do you have, without going too in depth?
Yeah, for fantasy baseball, when we're playing categories, I think this is what we're doing, what we usually do. But when you play categories, right, you're trying to win a majority. A lot of times people get greedy and they try to set their team so they can win all 8 categories or 9 categories, but that's not the strategy in categories. The strategy is to win as many categories or specialize in categories
Like,
and
do
then
4 and
try
yeah.
exactly and try to build your others as you go or try to win a couple more. So what I always do is, I pick like my first couple, like maybe 5 to 8 rounds. I pick the best players available, just whoever I like, who I think is going to break out or whatever. And then based on your players you have, you analyze. Okay, what do I have?
Mhm.
Let's say I chose Aaron Judge, Mike Trout. Give me some other home run hitters. I don't know. Nelson Cruz. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
basic.
Nelson Cruz,
But
DH.
let's say if that's my core team, okay, I have a lot of home runs and RBIs, but maybe my average is lacking. I could use some more stolen bases, or I need ERA or Ks, right?
Mhm.
So then you decide, okay, what other is left in the draft so I can maybe specialize in a couple more as I continue to build up my home runs and maybe make that my competitive advantage, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the way you have to approach baseball because when you try to fill all 8 categories, that's usually when you go, 4-4 because
That's when you
someone
become
else.
average and you don't have a
Exactly, right.
specialized.
And you have
Yeah.
to specialize in order to win. And all you have to do is win 5 out of 8. If you win 5 out of 8 every single week, you're in the playoffs.
Mhm.
And then you have to stream and make sure you get the good players to build your lineup, especially as injuries go on. But that's kind
Yeah,
of my general advice, just for any fantasy, really.
except for fantasy football. Um,
Yes.
fantasy football's points. No,
Yeah.
but I think that's a good thing. I think for a lot of my advice, um is just staying with it because fantasy baseball is I mean, it's not the 162 games, but it
Hmm.
does happen every single day. And that's something that's unique for baseball.
Hmm.
I think it's great. But you do have to stay with it and you have to set your lineup every single day and you have to make sure you're on the waiver wire and you're looking for the best players because especially in this time with COVID-19, somebody could test positive and then they're out for 3 weeks and then you have to find their
Hmm.
backup or you have to figure out what's happening.
Hmm.
So I think my advice would just be sticking with it and, you know, it's gonna be a grind. Um,
Hmm.
how do you value rookies or maybe 2-year players? I kinda wanna bring this up because it is a top-heavy prospect in my mind. You have, Wander Franco with Tampa Bay. You have Luis Robert with the White Sox. You have some Gavin Locks with the
Hmm.
Dodgers. I know I'm missing one more player, um, but kind of what's your mindset going in with prospects that have such a high potential and high ceiling?
My best example is that I picked up Cody Bellinger a minute after I heard he was being called up, and he ended up helping me, I think, win that season, win that league, or at least make it to playoffs.
Yeah,
So my advice is, I mean, if you have someone you can drop easily, or I mean, okay, if you have someone that's, I guess, I mean, you just have to treat them as any other player.
hmm
They're always going to have high potential, and I think ESPN rankings do a pretty good job of like projecting them. Sometimes they overvalue them a little bit, but for the most part, I think they're in good rankings where they are usually.
yeah,
Um, Sometimes they're really sleepers though, especially for drafting. But streaming wise, yeah, I mean, always keep an eye on them on your watch list. I think you have to also check, if they're really going to have a starting position or not. Because if they're going to be on the bench, then there's no
Mm.
reason to draft them until they start playing or some injury happens. So that's again where the news, paying attention to Bleacher Report and ESPN Sports Center, that kind of
Let's
stuff is
let's
important.
compare it to for the sake of this argument
Mhm.
and to prolong it. Let's compare it to fantasy football. How would you compare a top prospect in baseball to a top rookie in the NFL? Which one do you value more? Which one
And
would you reach for?
football,
Football? Okay.
football, because I drafted Saquon Barkley as a rookie.
Okay.
Um,
And he obviously has, for baseball, it's more of just like when you have the position, you have the ability to play more.
right, right, and I think, I mean, it's hard to compare because there's not going to be a Saquon rookie type in the bigs. Because a lot of times rookies, we don't really know if they're going to play sometimes that year, or it's
Mm.
going to be halfway through the season just because of that the
Contract.
the contract issue, right?
Yeah.
Of forgot the terminology is, but
If they
um,
have to surpass a certain amount of
right,
bats or
exactly,
at bats
right.
to
Because
yeah.
like, how many rookies have we seen actually start the season? Like Cody Bellinger started halfway.
Um,
Baez, I want to say he got called up midway.
yeah, I would maybe Makata. Yeah, I
But
mean
you know what I mean?
you're correct, but I would say this then, Rieta. I
Mm-hmm.
would say shortened season, more
Mm,
prospects, right?
yeah.
Or
So I
not?
think you just have to, really stream the news and read the reports on whether they're going to play. If Joe Adele and Luis Robert are going to be in the starting lineup, yeah, you should draft them as wherever they are ranked,
Mhm.
just as any normal player, or even, draft them early. Because I remember like a couple years ago, Sean drafted Yohan Moncada because he was going to play and get called up,
Yeah,
but it took forever for him to get called up, and Sean
yeah.
needed some roster space, so we dropped him. I picked him up that year, and he played really well for me. So again, rookies are hard to tell, but with the shortened season, I'd probably expect more players to play, and we're going to see players sit out. Like Buster Posey is sitting out, right?
Right.
I don't know if they announced whether Joey Bart's going to play or not, but
That is
he's one
interesting.
of their top potential. I mean, one of their highest ranked, prospects. So same thing with Joe Adele, Mike Trout. I think is still playing as of now, but as soon as something happens to one of the outfielders, Joe Adele's going to play.
I
You
think
know,
he is. I think yeah. I think the Angels want him to play too.
oh, they want him to play. Okay, well then
I
there
I
you go.
do. Um,
Um,
but I also want to say this. I think for rookies, especially, I think it is hard for them to maybe, unless you have like that generational talent,
mhm,
um, it is kind of hard to get adapted to the game.
mhm.
So maybe we'll see them struggling more. What are your thoughts on? Sorry, this is a prolonged segment. Pitching prospects, rookies compared to batting prospects. Who do you think fares better?
Batting.
Okay.
I think it takes rookie pitchers a while. Even Tyler Glasnow struggled a little bit when he first came in. Then he had some injuries. Um, Michael Soroka pitched surprisingly well. But a lot of times, we don't see rookie pitchers perform, especially well. Justice Sheffield didn't pitch like super well for us. Justin Dunn
Mm,
didn't do anything that special per se. Trying to think of other rookie examples. Michael Kopech was okay. Giolito was terrible his rookie year, but then
yeah.
he figured it out a couple of years after, and he's playing. He's one of the top pitchers now. So I mean, rookie pitchers, I think it because a lot of times they skip AAA, right? If you're a top ranked prospect, you go from AA to the bigs. Usually, you just kind of skip that midway AAA. So
Mhm.
that's a lot of valuable time, and sometimes they feel rushed, and I think that can hurt pitchers. But I mean, from experience from watching hitters, rookie hitters, they've done great. So I
It
say
is
hitters are definitely of
yeah.
more value than pitchers right now.
It is actually very interesting because, looking at like the top pitchers, they are older, you know. Clayton Kershaw, Justin Verlander, Garrett Cole is getting up there in age. Um, I mean, David Price was good. He has fallen off a cliff and he's lost. But yeah, it is interesting to see that when you don't really, for pitchers, it's usually like the 26 to 29 area where they become really dominant.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think one of the rarities was Felix.
Hmm.
He came in at the age of 19 and just performed amazingly.
Right.
Um, I don't know any pitchers on the on the horizon that might have an impact similar to right away. Um,
I mean, Forrest Whitley for the
oh,
Astros,
Houston, yeah.
I think might pitch this year.
Yeah, but do you think yeah, I just think it's so tough. I don't see somebody with the I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, but
I'm
again, like I wouldn't draft him,
yeah, that's
but
what I'm
maybe I'll
saying. I
stream him if he's going to pitch spot start. Maybe I'll pick him up for that
yeah,
start, but it's hard to say.
it is. Um, yeah, okay, so then let's transition over to positions. What position? So I know you value hitters. For me, I think, do you value infields or outfields, or is it just more hitting than anything else? Is there a position that goes into it? Because I know for fantasy football, you really have to look at, okay, running back is probably going to
Right.
be the higher priority because of the point difference. But with the MLB, it's different with categories. So what positions are you um, kind of looking at, or if any?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think around the league, player scarcity in baseball is not as big of a deal as compared to football.
Okay,
Um, when I say that, I mean like so if you pick, the top five running backs, in the league, you're gonna be fine. You don't need another good running back. I mean, you do, but you could probably wait a couple rounds, right?
yeah,
But after the top five, there's a huge drop off, right? I think tight ends, same thing. Unless you get the top three, there's a huge,
exactly.
huge drop off.
Yeah,
Wide receivers, you need to probably get in the top 10, otherwise a huge drop off. QB,
yeah,
same thing, right? I think for baseball, it's a little bit more balanced. Like I could probably name off 10 great first basemen right now that you could be fine with in fantasy. Same with shortstop, same with second, same with third, and
that's
obviously
true.
same in the outfield because there's three
Yeah,
outfield positions, right? Um, but catchers is the most scarce position out of all of them. I think that's the most comparable to like tight ends or running backs in the NFL because after the top, five or so, let's say JT Realmuto,
hmm
Buster Posey would usually be in this list. Gary Sanchez, Yasmani Grandal. Who else am
yeah.
I missing?
I kind of want to say one more thing about the catchers.
Hmm.
Gary Sanchez, I know he's been dealing with his inability to defensively play
Hmm.
catcher. I know the Yankees have been on a short leash with him. Do
Hmm.
you think that goes into your decision making that maybe he's not going to be playing catcher and be in that lineup? Or do you think his bat's just too good? Because I know he has a very good bat. It's the universal DH is in effect, but granted, the Yankees are also a DH hitting team. But then you have like Stanton. Is defense come into play in any position?
No, I think it definitely does. But yeah, going back to the kind of main question. I mean, obviously, I always look for the hitting. I'm looking for the
Okay,
best hitters,
yeah, of
and then
course.
you have to worry about the positions after your top five or top eight picks,
Hmm.
right? And then for Gary Sanchez, for example, I would not be worried because his bat is so good. He's played some first base. They have a DH spot. They can move Luke Voigt to first and have a DH spot vacant for Gary
Yeah.
Sanchez. They don't have that good of a backup catcher anyways, and Gary Sanchez is working on his defense. So yeah, I think that kind of question does come into play for people who are on the fringe. But when you're talking about like a Gary Sanchez, maybe not. But let's say, I don't know, if we were talking about, I don't know,
Any catch?
someone on
Is
the
it catcher?
fringe, like a Mariner, maybe like Shed Long, for example,
Oh,
or
okay. So
Dee
any
Gordon.
okay.
If they're
Yeah,
on the fringe, yeah, maybe you have to think about other factors of, their age,
exactly.
what the future, yeah, based on age and how they play into the future of the team, you know, how their defense is. But yeah, for someone like Gary Sanchez, I think he's like a guaranteed no-brainer. He's going to be in the lineup unless
Okay.
he's injured.
Yeah, that
But
is
yeah, that's a good
interesting.
question.
Um, so looking at like teams specifically, I know there's a lot of teams that play in hitter friendly ballparks and pitcher
Hmm.
friendly ballparks. For instance, the Yankees,
Hmm.
notorious for having hitting being
Right.
their name thing.
Yep.
Colorado, the
Hmm.
Rockies,
Hmm.
maybe because of elevation, and then
Hmm.
you get into some stadiums that might be more pitcher friendly. Do
Hmm.
you value that, or do you just look at their pure ability to hit?
Yeah,
Because yeah,
I actually do look into that.
okay,
Every year I have my list of, the friendliest ballparks to the pitcher friendliest ballparks.
yeah,
And it's something I do compare, but that's more like the last part of the application.
okay,
If I'm comparing, a Mariner and a Yankee hitter, and I think they're about equal, I'd probably choose the Yankee.
hmm
But again, that's not going to decide, between Mike Trout and I don't know,
Ye
Aaron Hicks or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm just
No,
if I think someone is A and
comparable.
B are similar, that might
Yeah.
be the deciding factor. So it is important to know that stuff, or at least look that stuff up too, if you're really trying to take baseball seriously, I think.
So there's some advice.
Yeah,
If
and that
you
helps with
are
pitchers too.
comparable with a player, look at where they play because that can
Mhm.
play a big,
Yeah,
big factor,
yeah.
in the overall thing. I think it's interesting because 60 games is so like you said before, it's just a sample size of the huge, like, 162.
Mhm,
So, I mean, when you're really looking at the past stats, do you look for consistency or do you look for maybe somebody that's gonna break out and, maybe not have the best track record, but it's only 60 games, so anything can happen, right? Like, it's
yeah.
very interesting. I think that's something that this season's gonna be special because fantasy can go either way, you know? You can have somebody that for a pitcher that just kills it and goes 8, maybe 5 starts and throws doesn't give up a run, you know?
Mhm.
And then that could be the same for, like, hitting, somebody could go on a 30-game hitting streak, right? And that's half the
Mhm.
season. So, I mean,
Yeah.
because you've seen this, like, what is the okay, tell me this, what's the average batting what's the batting average normally around? 275, maybe 280?
The whole league?
Yeah, whole league. I
Probably
know
like
that's a big sample size.
250,
250? Okay,
I'd
scratch
say.
that. Fantasy. To top play not top
Oh,
players, but, like,
the
you're
drafted
you're
players?
looking for, like, 275, right?
Yeah, yeah.
275, 280. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these hitters are maybe batting above 300 just because it's they're not getting that as much batting, at bats, and I don't know. And then that goes into kind of what you said before, though. Will hitting suffer? It's hard
Mhm.
to tell. It really is.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
I
that's
wanna
good.
ask you a question
Yeah,
after
go for it.
this. What do you think of closers
That's a good
with
question.
this season?
Yeah, I like that question. For me, I think I would value them still really high. Maybe they're not playing every single day, but saves is still a category, right?
Mhm,
And if everybody's not playing the whole entire league, then that's affecting everybody else.
mhm,
So I think I don't think I'm going um, to draft them high. If I have another hitter that's better, I
mhm,
wouldn't do that personally. But maybe when it's getting later into the draft, I might look at maybe drafting a closer over a relief pitcher like Andrew Miller. I
mhm,
just think their ability to get that category, which is great, their ability to hopefully lower your ERA or WHIP with not
mhm,
giving up a run or a
mhm,
walk. Um, and there are going to be closer games, I believe, because
mhm,
hitters might suffer. So you might be in a 1-0 game or
mhm,
a 2-0 game. So I don't know. That's kind of my thing. And
mhm,
obviously I am um not I'm good at fantasy, but I'm not the best
mhm,
at fantasy baseball. But just looking at like the big picture and how 60 games is so small,
mhm.
you might need to have maybe at least two state closers to kind of corner
Yeah,
that market in
that's a
terms
good
of
point.
closers.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
I
wh-
think
yeah,
from the closer perspective, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because, again, we don't know. We haven't watched the game yet. We don't really know what
exactly.
the season is like. Again, there's only 60 games, so like you said, the stakes are higher.
Hmm.
So you have to win every game, which hopefully would mean that they're relying on their closers more.
Hmm.
But some analysts are saying to shy away from closers early in the draft or where you typically could draft them.
Okay.
But I'm gonna.
Yeah, I wouldn't draft him early if
Mhm.
that's the
But I
thing.
guess my question is, would you draft them where you normally draft them, or would you wait longer this year?
Oh, okay, okay.
It's a
I get it.
difficult
I
question,
get it
right,
now.
to think about.
Um, okay. I think I would draft him. It's tough because this is so this is not territory that we've been in 60 games.
Mhm,
Um, I think I would value hitting more,
mhm,
to be honest with you. But and I think starting pitching is definitely better. But
mhm.
if I had a choice between a relief pitcher and a closer, I think I'd go closer.
Mhm.
And I think
No,
maybe
yeah.
that means I don't draft him where I usually draft him in a
Mhm.
162 season. but I don't think I'm drafting him way later, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because some fantasy analysts are saying, yeah, don't draft closers early in the draft or like where you normally draft them.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, with the stakes being higher, it's not a marathon anymore. It's a half marathon or
Hmm.
like I don't know, like a 2K
Is
or
it?
a
It could
3K,
be like
whatever.
you could call this a sprint
Yeah,
if you
it's a
think
long
about it,
sprint. Yeah.
because 60 games. Tell me this. Do you think if the Mariners started 20-2, okay, in 60 games, that is a sprint to 20-2? Once you have that, you're pretty much good to go, hopefully. But
Yeah.
but if they were to start maybe 20-2 in 162 games, nobody would think about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think it is a sprint, to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
Um, yeah, it's a long sprint. But I mean, yeah, I think closers are going to rely heavily, honestly. And I think closers' values actually might go up in the situation. My only reasoning is this because my in the past leagues that I've played in,
Hmm.
some years I'd go closers heavy, so
Okay.
I'd try to win and lock down a save category, just kind of getting a competitive advantage. But a lot of times when you have really good closers, like you said, WHIP goes down, ERA hopefully goes down, and sometimes you can accumulate a good amount of Ks. Because if you
Hmm.
get a pitcher that averages 2 strikeouts an inning, and they pitch five
Yeah.
innings that week, they get that's 10 Ks. You know,
It is
um,
risky, though.
it is risky,
It is
yes, because
risky.
it is inflated with one bad relief or walk off home run they give up. But again, you lose wins most likely because
Hmm.
that's what pitchers usually can help you with, an innings pitched and whatever.
You hope you don't win wins, because if you're winning wins, that means you blew the save.
Yeah, yeah. So you get one or the other, and sometimes some categories have holds too.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you can get a solid amount of good closers, I think it might really help you this season because I feel like they're going to be relied on more. And there's going to hopefully be more crunch time situations because hopefully the games will just be more competitive. And just based on how, if pitchers don't pitch as long,
Yeah.
might be worth, a closer might be equivalent to a decent pitcher who's only going to throw 5 innings and throw 6 strikeouts,
No, I
you
agree with
know?
you. I
So
think
it's,
it is
yeah.
interesting. It is very interesting. What do you think about relief pitchers here in
Yeah.
this
So
shortened season?
this is also an interesting one. I think I'm going to be streaming relief pitchers heavily
Mhm.
once the season starts. As far as drafting, I'm really not sure yet. I think if anything, I might draft a great setup man who's maybe in line to be he's the secondary closer. But he's, like let's say Andrew Miller when he was with the Yankees when he wasn't a closer yet,
Yeah.
or Dylan Betances,
Dale
or maybe
Betances.
Kelvin Herrera when he was with, the Greg Holland, um,
Royals.
Brandon Finnegan trio.
Yeah.
So in that situations, yeah, I might draft him. But at the top of my mind, I can't think of anybody like that right now.
I
'Cause I
think the
feel like
only
the
guy.
closers are pretty spread around. I
Yeah.
can't think of any top tier relievers. Can you? Right? Like it's
No.
hard to think about. There aren't that many like Dellin Betances, really setup relievers anymore. Actually, well, Dellin Betances is a setup man now for the Yankees because Britton's there, but he's not. He hasn't been the same for the
I don't
last
think
couple of
he's been
years.
as great. Yeah, and maybe we'll have to pause and look back, but it
But
is
it's something to
tough.
think about. I think.
And I do think you're right. 162 games, I think, opens up that relief setup pitcher.
Mhm,
Players get well known for that and kind of get their niche. I know
mhm,
there's been in the past, a player that's not been as great, but through 162 games,
mhm,
they've been able to perform, and then they become that top tier relief pitcher, that
mhm,
comes in. But with
mhm.
60 games, I don't think a lot of relief pitchers are going to get that much opportunity, especially with the expanded roster, right?
Well, see, I'd argue the opposite because if starting pitchers only go five or
Exactly. Yeah,
six,
that's
that's
true.
the
That
hope,
is
but we
true.
don't know yet.
Yeah.
They might start throwing 7 innings in the
Yeah.
next week or two. So
Yeah.
again, it's hard. We have no idea
Yeah,
how the
that is
market's
true. I
going to
forgot
go.
about that.
So um,
Because if they are, yeah, that's fair. That's a fair point. We don't know.
yeah, we
But
literally don't know.
I think if we were to look at this and take into account that they do have an expanded roster, with their pitchers, they have this taxi squad with
Hmm.
30 other players where they can go in and out.
Hmm.
You might see if you're drafting to a team that doesn't have a frontline setup player, you I would shy away from, because I think there's going to be more. relief opportunities for everybody.
I do agree with that. Yeah.
Um, but I mean, yeah. So let's get into average versus home runs and talk about the value of that compared to um yeah. Do you think it's tougher to accumulate more home runs, or do you think it should be a good opportunity to go with average during this time? Because personally, I think for me, I think home runs are the way to go if I were to lock up a category compared to average. But
Hmm.
you do have to think into the fact if they have a good average, they'll get on. They'll have stolen bases. You know,
Right.
they'll have a slug. Like slugging will be in fact
Hmm.
it's tough. That is on base
You know,
percentage
yeah.
and stuff like that.
I mean, I think with hitters, I always so the home run and average kind of um
Debate
yeah, debate. I kind of think, well, home runs is always going to come with RBIs,
exactly. See, yeah,
right? And average is kind of by itself if you think about it. There's not something specifically correlated to it.
I would say
OBP is
stolen bases.
sometime. Yeah, but not
Would
everyone
you?
though, right?
Okay,
Buster
yeah,
Posey hits 300. He's not going to steal 30 bases.
that's
So
fair.
yeah, no, but you're right. But there are players who will hit for high average and stolen bases. Let's say Lorenzo Cain was a huge candidate, for that. He was a perfect example of that a couple of years ago.
And I would say right now it'd be Trey Young or Trey Turner.
Trey
Sorry,
Turner, yes,
Trey Turner.
exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think when you're drafting, home runs is easier to find with
Okay,
RBIs and stack up because a lot of times you can stream players with high average.
okay,
You can always find like a Logan Forsythe was a great free agent waiver wire pickup for me the past couple of years. Doesn't hit that many home runs, but gets on base, hits like 290, 280, and has different position eligibility. So I think
yeah,
if you want to lock up home runs, you have to do it in drafts. There aren't that
that's great.
many. There aren't
That's
that
good
many
advice.
waiver wire people because people think home runs are more valuable already and in the draft. So you'll be harder to find them because sometimes you can find like a CJ Crone on the waiver market, Logan Morrison, but that's about it. A lot of
That
them are
is
already
good
going to be
advice.
drafted. So
It's kind of similar to, I would say, running back, to be honest with you. If you got a guy that can hit 25 home runs, 30 home runs,
mhm,
that's kind of like a starting running back in fantasy football where people are not going to pass that up. Um,
mhm,
you won't find that on the waiver wire. You won't find a
mhm.
starting running back on the waiver wire just because they have
Yes,
that
that's a good.
ability.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um, but yeah, so that's another advice.
Hmm.
Boom.
Let's see what else do I have on my list of notes. Oh, universal DH, like you mentioned earlier.
Right. So the universal DH has now been implemented in the National League. The AL has always had it. What are your first gut reactions to the universal DH for the NL, and how will that affect fantasy play?
I think so. It could lead to more RBIs, more runs, just because that 9 hole or 8 hole spot is the actual hitter now. So if they get on base,
Yeah,
let's say Mookie Betts for the Dodgers, who's hitting 1 or 2, could have an RBI chance
that is
instead of
true.
a no one on base with one out. If the pitcher leads off. So it definitely benefits NL hitters now. It because in the past you could almost say NL hitters are at a disadvantage compared to American League hitters slightly, but
And you
now
could
they're
say
both.
that NL pitchers are at an advantage too.
Yes, exactly. So now, oh yeah, you're right. It balances out.
You can't you
But
can't
yes, so
have that
now,
K
no, that's a really good point though, because like
hypothetically.
people
Yeah.
used to say, oh, NL pitchers are not as good as American League pitchers because they had one easy out. But now it's balanced out. So also in terms of the stats and the history and stuff, it's leveled out now. So I think it's good we did this. So that argument is like no longer valid anymore.
Hmm.
Yeah, but for fantasy, it moves things around.
It does.
So when you're thinking about, the good NL teams like the Dodgers, they never had a DH. So now where does that DH go hit? Who is that DH going to be?
Exactly. You know what's
So,
also interesting
uh-huh,
is when you would think about it, like kind of like you said earlier, when Mookie Betts went to the Dodgers, you could probably kind of see that as a downgrade because now he's not getting that opportunity, like you said. But now he is. So everything's
mhm,
leveled out. And now I think he is in a better spot than he was with Boston
yeah,
because you have
yeah.
Bellinger backing you out.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see, like, for example, so this is obviously the best example because the Dodgers have such good depth, right? So
Yeah.
their outfield's going to be um, Mookie, Cody
And Senna.
Bellinger,
Yeah.
and AJ Pollock or Jock Peterson. Their infield's going to be Max Muncy at first, Gavin Lux, Corey Seager, Justin Turner, and then the catcher is Austin Barnes. But like, if you think about it, who's that DH going to be? Where would that DH hit? You
Yeah.
know, it's interesting to think about how that affects, because in the American League, the DH is sometimes the cleanup hitter, the three
Mhm.
hitter, the five hitter, the six hitter.
Yeah.
But you wonder if it moves NL lineups around and are players at disadvantages where they normally hit in the lineup. Like if you hit 6 or 7 in NL lineup, you could be put down a spot or two, which
Mhm.
could limit your RBIs.
I would see for the Dodgers, looking just at what you told me right there. Well, is Gavin Lux gonna be their second baseman?
I think he's going to be their second baseman.
Okay.
I'll pull up the depth chart right
Yeah,
now, but
pull
I'm
up the
pretty
depth
sure.
chart. I would say from just reading off those names there, maybe the Dodgers put Jock Peterson, maybe the 9 hole, just because of his speed and his ability, and then put AJ Pollock in the outfield. But then again, AJ Pollock's had injury
Yeah,
history, so maybe
right.
you DH him. Um, but it just gives another hitter. And
Oh, see, they also have Enrique Hernandez, who might move
right, and
around.
he's a guy that can hit and get on base. So just another tool for your Mookie Betts or your first round pick in Cody Bellinger to get that opportunity for RBIs. Could open up the floor a lot, and you could see that stat blow up.
Yeah. Let's
It's
look at
also
another NL team
yeah.
and then just name another NL team. I will pull up a depth chart.
Let's do let's do the Phillies.
Let's see how they're, where the DH could fit into there.
Yeah,
Actually, this is a good example because they have a couple like big hitters.
yeah. Um,
So right now,
I also wanted to say one
go
more
ahead.
thing. Do you
Uh-huh.
think? And maybe I'll just talk while you pull it up. But
Hmm.
maybe NL teams will try just for this year to go out and get a DH hitter. Do you think that's possible?
This year or next year?
Maybe this year. Well, for this year because it will be in place all of in the playoffs as well.
You mean via trade or something?
Be a trade, yeah. You could see a struggling AL team maybe.
Yeah, like let's say Encarnacion and the White Sox are out of it, they go
Yeah,
trade for Encarnacion.
that might not
Or
happen.
someone trades for Vogelback.
But that's exactly the player I was thinking about, though. Somebody that does not have a position on the field, but can help you in the lineup with your bat.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Oh, yeah, I could totally see that happening.
that's actually who I was thinking about for that. So we'll see. And
That does make it. That's a good point. Yeah, it opens up the trade market a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So for the Phillies,
yeah,
JT Realmuto is a lock at catcher.
hmm
The first base depth chart is Hoskins, Bruce, Neil Walker. So I
so
think without even going into the rest of this, I think Bruce and Neil Walker could be DH candidates
that's true.
because they're old and I don't think their defense is as reliable anymore, especially Neil Walker.
Yeah, no, I agree
Um,
with you.
but they also, Josh Harrison, in the third depth chart, so maybe Segura's going to pinch hit Harrison in the field or Kingery. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, this makes it
Yeah,
very helpful for NL teams.
it does. It strategizes that way where it's like, okay, now I have somebody I can get on first, maybe steal a base.
Yeah,
Then it turn over the lineup and you have your top 3 hitters.
yeah.
And
But I
then
mean, like,
yeah,
if you were DH Bruce, where would you put him in this lineup, though? You
if I were to
have Bryce
DH,
Harper, McCutcheon, Segura, Didi Gregorius, Scott Kingery, JT Realmuto, Hoskins.
so if I were the Phillies, I might look at where he has played or where he's performed the best, and I think it might be like the 5th spot, you know?
Hmm.
And hitters in baseball, they kind of get locked into a lineup.
Hmm.
Um, a good example is Kyle Seager. He is always going to be a 5th spot hitter.
Hmm.
And then you have like a number 1 hitter in um, I don't know,
Hmm.
anybody, but they kind of get locked in over the years.
Hmm.
So wherever he performs well, it's
Hmm.
probably where he's going to be.
Hmm.
Um, I have one more kind of discussion for
Hmm.
fantasy.
Hmm.
Now that the overtime rules or extra innings rules has changed,
Hmm.
how are you valuing maybe well, like, what do you think? Do you think that'll have any impact? Players starting on second, maybe, because if you think about it, the RBI, it doesn't count as an RBI. It
Yeah,
counts as
and it
an
doesn't count as
error.
an earned run either.
So maybe you're valuing relief pitchers now that we come back to it. If they're not going to get that earned run, but maybe they'll
Mhm.
get a strikeout. So it is interesting for that.
Yeah, I mean, just in the grand scheme of things, less extra innings would mean less relief opportunities. Like, just thinking big picture wise, economics wise. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say how the extra inning things fits in because it doesn't count as an RBI. You said?
I think it only counts as an. Let me fact check it. I know it doesn't count against the pitcher.
Yeah, I remember that too. But that would make sense. If it's an RBI, it would have to be an earned run, so it can't be an RBI then.
That's what I was thinking, but that was my mindset to
Okay.
it. Um,
So I
MLB.
mean, that's just like a zero sum situation. So we can't, it doesn't hurt either the hitter or the pitcher. So I don't really
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
but strikeouts are still a
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, if you get a hit, you'll get an
Yeah.
average, and if you get a strikeout, you'll decrease the average. So I was thinking, do you think this new rule impacts anything at all or not? It's just the same.
If
For me,
anything, it hurts relief pitchers just because, and hitters, I guess, because they have less opportunities to redeem themselves later in the game.
right?
But other than that, no. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other advice you want to give off to the people that are drafting in the next few days?
Let me see. Oh, especially with this season,
Yeah.
make sure to pay attention to what players are going to be playing what positions. Utility players are really helpful in fantasy baseball because there are so many positions you have to fill in the lineup. But also, it's not like football where they all play within 1 day or 2 days,
Hmm.
and it's week
It's
by
every
week.
single
Baseball is
day.
every day. You have
It's
to
every
set your
single day.
lineup, so it's helpful to have utility players that can play different positions or pay attention to news. Like apparently, Bryce Harper was practicing third base. I don't know if that's actually going to happen
Oh
or
my
not,
gosh.
but that
He'll
could
get that
be.
third base eligibility.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a huge thing, right? Right field or outfield, third base. Like, just pay attention to that kind of stuff. Like Buster Posey a couple of years ago started playing first, so he's a first base catcher now.
Yeah.
Or Austin Barnes is a catcher, second base. So it's good to keep an eye on that stuff. And yeah, and basically just keep up with current events. I guess that's the best way to think about fantasy baseball.
Yes, especially with COVID, you need to have a list, especially when drafting, who
Hmm.
who might have the symptoms or who has positive, who has opted out of the season. Make sure you guys keep track of that. Um, and then, of course, value for us, we're going to value maybe the home run ball and maybe less starting pitchers earlier on. But then again, this is going to be an interesting season. It will be a new season. Everything will be a first. So there's no science in fantasy. And that it's more real now that it's only 60 games. So
Hmm.
my advice is just to stick with it every single day. Hopefully, yeah. Final words of wisdom for you, Ryota.
Don't think too much into it. Just go gut reactions. Sometimes your
Yeah,
initial reactions that you like someone or who you think's going to break out. Sometimes it's the one, and it's just
exactly.
fantasy.
It
Unless
is.
you're betting like a bunch of money on it, otherwise it's low stakes.
Yeah, I also agree. Last thing, sorry. What do you value for big names? Do you think big names are more impactful for the MLB or for NFL?
Probably football, because you can always find sleepers in MLB. I think.
There you go. Don't always trust the biggest names. Do your research. All right. We are done. We have talked. Hopefully everybody stayed with us. Thanks again for tuning in. We will be back Thursday for our big discussions. Hope to see everybody there and have a good one.
Yep. See ya.